Takes Radio Company, helping you connect with your audience, presents another premiere production of the Jesus Entrepreneur Experience, how to be a world-class Jesus entrepreneur. And today, a special feature. To be an entrepreneur and successful in life and business, you need to know about the big R word. That's right, the big R word. Let's see what that says. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, friends, and perhaps a few foes. This is Stan once again for the Jesus Entrepreneur Experience, helping you be a world-class Jesus entrepreneur. Now, of course, right now, some of you are saying, oh, you are one of those Christian business guys. Well, no. Remember, here's a good entrepreneurial thing. Whenever somebody compares you to somebody else, you just say two words: we're different. That's the key. Remember, whatever you are tagged as being, always say, no, we're different. And now we're not going to tell you how we're different. Here's a second thing you need to know. Don't try and describe what you do. Demonstrate how good you are. And they can discover how good you are and discover what you do. So I have asked, by the way, the song that brought you in. Now that's one of my favorite songs, called Road to Arizona. I don't know why I like that. I love Arizona, and that's just an upbeat song. And remember, this is not a typical Christian religious program. Okay? That's why I was successful as a Christian broadcaster for many years, because I didn't sound like a boring Christian broadcaster. And I want to do that again. That's why I always have interesting people, not boring people. Tim, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Stan. Good to be here.
And Tim is very different. Now, will show you more, but he is a longtime entrepreneur. He chose that way of life. He fell into that way of life. He succeeded at that way of life. And like every entrepreneur, he's always living a bit on the edge, but that's the way it is. The reason I asked Tim, because Tim is one of the people who really helped me understand that there is a relationship between faith and Jesus and entrepreneurialism. And this is about Jesus being an entrepreneur. By the way, somebody has asked me, is this a Bible study program? No, it's not. We are not going to study the Bible. This is a Jesus study program. We're going to study Jesus because he's a remarkable character. And that's why we have this kind of crazy thing when I do this, which is given me by my AI robot, which is, what would Jesus do if he were here today as an entrepreneur? Same as you. How would he do it? Because he is an entrepreneur, and we are at a turning point. Charlie Kirk was an entrepreneur. Crazy Donald Trump, whether you think it or not, is an entrepreneur. And we are at turning points in many parts of our world today. Everybody's there. The AI thing is turning things around. What's going to happen with the Middle East is going to turn things around. Obviously, the Charlie Kirk turning point is going to really change a lot of Christian ministry as he becomes the hero he probably deserved to be. Now, with that in mind, let me tell you, the reason I particularly wanted my friend here is he is an expert in the big R word. And if you are an entrepreneur, you are going to have to deal with the R word. So, Tim, it's your turn in your town of Champaign-Urbana, and to the rest of the world, you're on. What is the big R word?
That would be risk or risking. Take your choice. You can have either one.
And he has written the book on risking. So he's giving you maybe 150, $300 worth of information right now on a little bit of how to look for risk and deal with it. You're on, my friend.
Yeah, well, as you said, Stan, there's a couple of key ingredients to being a successful entrepreneur, and one of those is to have both the mentality as well as ultimately taking the action step of embracing risk or taking risks. Um, that's really sort of fundamental to the definition of entrepreneurship, right? If you're going to ultimately have a large vision and so forth, whether it's to save the world or save the whales or just to solve some key problem that you notice exists in the world today. It's one thing to have a vision, but it's an entirely different thing than to be able to put yourself in a position to act. And that often involves getting outside your comfort zone and taking a risk, and making a decision that you're going to move this thing forward. And so, the entrepreneurs that I've been privileged to work with in our work as a venture firm, that we often see that what distinguishes a truly successful company or entrepreneur from those that are not is that the entrepreneur is willing to take appropriate risks.
Are they sometimes willing to even risk against the odds?
Well, generally yes. I think the short answer to that is yes, right? Because I would say that if you look at what most entrepreneurs are doing, right, they're bringing some type of a solution to the marketplace for a pain point or a problem that exists. It hasn't been solved with current solutions or current technologies, and so by definition, there's going to be friction or forces working against that new solution just because that's the way life works. So yeah, at the end of the day, you could say that taking risks, you're often bucking the odds to bring your idea to reality.
Once someone said this about our life as Christian. He said this. He said, I've almost come to the conclusion that Jesus became so much, and he even used the word, of a risk-taking entrepreneur when the Father said, go to planet Earth and clean up the mess.
Right.
And then he was promised that he would, he would rise from the dead. And someone said he had no more assurance of that than you and I have. That because he was one of us, which is to take the risk of becoming God, becoming a man, and dying, that he actually would be raised from the dead. He was taking that risk. Does that
Yeah.
ring with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you think of it, Jesus, the scripture tells us, set aside his uh, godhood or being God to, yeah, I mean, yeah, yes, he was fully God and fully man, but as he operated on the earth, he was setting aside uh, his godhood, so to speak. So and in so doing, and embracing the role of being a human, being a man. Yeah, clearly there was the ultimate risk of dying, and would he be resurrected? Right there was no precedent example for
Yes.
that per se. And again, that was obviously the biggest risk, but there were a variety of other risks, as you've touched on. Particularly as he interacted with the religious authorities, he was
Right.
absolutely saying and doing things that were monumental in scope because they were so opposed and so novel, to the accepted dogma of the day.
He was taking risks all the time,
Absolutely.
you know, and that's part of what we're trying to describe in ourselves is that, in effect, could we have enough faith? Um, I oftentimes, Tim and I have always talked about this, is God wants you to think like an entrepreneur, if not be one, uh, because that's got another word, the F word, faith.
Well, yeah, you mentioned that. I've been part of the Vineyard Church and the Vineyard movement dating back to the mid 1980s,
Mhm.
which will be indicative of at least somewhat what my age range is today. But hanging around, the Vineyard, and in the early days, the founder of the Vineyard, John Wimber, he was known to have a famous saying that, ultimately faith is spelled RISK. And that sort of resonated with me at the time, but I sort of, I think, limited the definition of what that really meant. I think when I first heard that, I thought, well, yeah, certainly praying for people, or stepping out and being incredibly generous, or, I mean, those are kind of risky acts, right? But I think what Wimber actually meant is that it goes well beyond just spiritual activity, although, you could make a case that all of our actions are ultimately spiritual in some sense. But risking goes way beyond just, the obvious spiritual things that you might do. It really has to do with just sort of our workaday, everyday decisions that we're making. And often, we're presented with opportunities to take risks, to get outside of a rut or get outside of a comfort zone. And ultimately, that is how God expands our faith, right? We step outside of a routine, a rut, a comfort zone, and all of a sudden,
Yes.
our faith muscle is exercised. We don't have a choice, because we're now outside of that which was familiar, and that which was routine. So, kind of by definition, we take that risk. Our faith muscle is exercised, and in so doing, our faith increases.
One one old book that talks about that, called Streams in the Desert, and in effect, what their point is throughout it is it's only when you're in the desert, when you're in a place you don't want to be,
Mm,
that God actually works.
yeah,
You know, that you'll find a little stream, maybe, and
yeah,
it's
for
a risk.
sure. Right.
Well, in your own life, Tim, and this, because I just want to make this succinct because you've introduced it so well. In your own life, how have you been able to have a little better, little less anxiety about risks that you take, that you just have a little more confidence in risk taking than you might have when you were younger?
Yeah, well, part of it just starts with actually, taking some risks, and risks range from small or minor to, much 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 bigger. And when I got out of school, I got an accounting degree at Illinois State University. I joined an accounting firm, and really over the course of almost 15 years with that accounting firm, I had lots of like little opportunities to risk. I hired people to join my team. I took on projects that maybe I wasn't entirely comfortable with, and so those were sort of opportunities to become a little more comfortable taking risks, and albeit they were on a smaller scale, a more manageable scale. And then when I was presented with an opportunity for my what I would consider my first really big risk, which was to leave Illinois and moved my wife and three daughters across the country to San Diego, California, when I was with the accounting firm. When that opportunity was presented to my wife and I, and we prayed through that and worked through that and thought through that and cried through that, over about a 2 month period of time as we were making that decision. I was able to draw on some of those prior experiences to know, win or lose, good outcome or bad outcome. And neither of those are really guaranteed in taking a risk. I mean, God doesn't say it's going to work all the time, but I knew that through the combination of various experiences that we could make a decision, and, ultimately, God had our back, whether, quote unquote, it would be successful or not. And so, yeah, we did make that decision to move cross country where we knew no one.
Mhm.
Effectively, we had no community. All of our family and church community and friend community was back here in central Illinois. So it was a huge risk from that standpoint. It was kind of a starting over risk for me. I had to build a whole new consulting team for the San Diego office. So it was giving up what had been a pretty good gig. And
A secure gig.
yeah, it was a lot of security about that. Not that I didn't have to perform, but I had a team of 10. We were rocking and rolling. We were well respected. We were doing good projects for a variety of clients, right? And I stepped outside that comfort zone to, kind of start over, so to speak. I don't want to sound overly dramatic about it, but yeah, that series of smaller risks had kind of set me up for that. And then from there, I've taken any number of continuing
Even
large
bigger
scale
risks.
risks. Yeah, yeah, I mean, absolutely.
And both
Ultimately,
and both
my
and
next
both
big
yeah.
risk was, leaving the accounting firm after I'd been 3 years in San Diego. Had a book that I wrote and was going to completely shift gears to attempt to become a professional speaker, author, leadership guru, and took that step, and sort of felt like I fell off a cliff in that particular case. But nevertheless, I never felt like God had again abandoned me in either, again, successful or failing at risk taking. And so, it was that experience and many others that convinced me, ultimately this is what God is asking of us. He wants us to grow in faith, and ultimately we do that by taking these risks in our ordinary lives.
And I just want for all of us to embrace that uncertainty if we're going to think about it. And I had a gentleman the other day who just said, "Well, no, I only do things that I know will work out." And I said, "I'm sorry, but we never know that."
We don't, we can have the illusion that,
Yes.
that's, things are going to work out. Here's the rub. John 10:10 in the Message, right, says the thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. I, Jesus, have come that they might have life and have it to the full.
Yep.
Other versions say abundant life, flourishing life. If you want an abundant life, a full life, a flourishing life, then you've got to follow Jesus's example and step out of your comfort zone and take a risk. That's how we do it, right? To not do that is to live within a diminished frame, a more narrow existence. And I don't know about you, but I'm going to go for the fullness and the abundance version.
Okay, here's the clue. Stop the program, people. Go back and play what he just said again. Write it down and record it, because that was the essence of what I wanted to come out today. That if you want to be fully alive, sorry, you have to salute to King Jesus and say, I'll follow you. I'll take some risk. And what we're trying to do is we say, in effect, he actually gave us some good ideas of how to do that, how to think, how to sell, how to build a team. And he said, I've got to get away from reality and deal with the real world so I can be in touch with the spirit force, because the reality world isn't real, but it's the reality I deal with, and it's going to be a bad one many times. There you go.
Yeah, and I think you make a good point that, you know, we do need to tap the power of the spirit, and that is what really gives us the framework for understanding the risks, you know, that we're going to be potentially taking, and what, you know, the consequences of those. So we're not operating, you know, out of our own thought process, but the idea is to join our thought process and our spirit process to the spirit. And in the midst of that, you know, we're going to find the life sustaining force that enables us to take some of these steps, to take some of these risks, so that we might ultimately experience full life and flourishing life.
Well, we'll talk about that, but that is exactly the introduction I wanted you to hear, and hear it from somebody who knows what they're talking about, because that's unusual today. So much advice comes from people who don't know what they're doing or what they're saying. But also, I liked him because he represents what I found in my many years of performance coaching, teaching entrepreneurs, is they tended to be men and women of curiosity. They had a lot of interests that had nothing to do with their business, but they were just curious and interested. And Tim, you have an aspiration to be involved in filmmaking. Tell us a little bit about that right now. You just went through some episode work. This is going to be
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah, well, my wife and I just returned from Ireland, where Aaron Burns and Burns and Company is filming uh, Jimmy, which is the story of Jimmy Stewart. Aaron and his team secured the rights to the Jimmy Stewart story from Jimmy's daughter, Kelly.
Yeah, right.
Jimmy had two daughters, and one of them, Kelly, is the executor of the estate, and so Aaron began developing a relationship with her years ago. And then, in fact, filming is actually wrapping up today, or just wrapped up today, a 2 month filming stint that began on near 2 months, that began on September 1st. But I go back about 12 or 13 years with Aaron. I got involved actually at the prompting of the spirit to join them with a project called Beyond the Mask years
Mm-hmm.
ago, and this was an action adventure film that Aaron made with his first cousin Chad Burns. I became, you know, in effect, somewhat of an executive producer, which just means you go out and raise the money.
That's right.
And so that experience all the way back then kind of planted the seed for, you know, continuing relationship with Aaron. In particular, at Chad went and took a position in the defense industry based on his PhD from the University of Illinois. But Aaron continued in the film business. Worked with the Kendrick brothers, who have made some
Yeah.
interesting films. Ultimately, you know, I think did well enough for them that Sony hired Aaron to do a couple of direct to streaming movies here over the last few years, and then based on the success of those, he was able to secure the rights to the Jimmy Stewart story. And yeah, I've been privileged to be a mentor and a coach to Aaron. It's clearly outside of the domain of my day job, which is, you know, venture capital.
Right.
But it's very entrepreneurial, and I have loved watching Aaron progress from, you know, doing a tiny independent film 12, 13 years ago to a major film that's going to have a major theatrical release come November of 2026, with a number of brand name partners that have joined in the marketing effort and so forth. So, you know, to be able to watch him come into that, it's just been a tremendous, you know, kind of, it really warms my my heart. Yeah, that's a bit of the backstory there.
Well, and that again demonstrates that those are the kind of things that you have to find your life and your energy and passion in. And what I'm loving about the world today, because we go way back, is that Hollywood may not like our message, obviously. But the thing that really drives them crazy now is that they know that our production quality is every bit as good as theirs. And that drives them nuts because they
Yeah,
used to
and
say, oh, that's one of those ham handed Christian films. That doesn't happen anymore.
no, this yeah, to your point, this is going to be a very high production value film. When we were over there, as Tony and I were able to be on set for a couple of days, watching a variety of scenes being filmed, literally with a crew of about 50
Yeah.
people, many of them from the Irish film industry, some from the U.S. But this is going to be a very high production value, very high quality film with some very well known stars, as a matter of fact, and it's going to be a strong message. A very family friendly message. But what a lot of people don't know is that Jimmy himself went through a very much a faith crisis during the filming of his most famous film, It's a Wonderful Life.
Yes,
That
right.
story is reflected in this movie, and
This is
it's
so
just so
neat to hear about this. Yes.
yeah, I know the reason Jimmy looks so realistic playing the part of George Bailey in that film is he's literally going through many of these same thoughts that George Bailey had. Like what does my life amount to? What difference does it make that I've been on the
Yeah.
planet? Well, he's experiencing that on a personal level, and he has this, dialogue with Francis Ford Coppola that
Yeah.
indeed, he can't redo that scene because he was pouring it all out, and that was
He
really
was the
him in
ultimate.
that in
He
that
was the
one take.
ultimate method actor, wasn't he?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well, I'm eager
So
to know that, but I want to just this is it. Someone said to me, and Tim and I would agree. This they say, and no bad is intended, but one said, "Stan, you guys need to know we've got enough pastors in the pulpits, but we need a lot of ministers in the marketplace." And
absolutely.
that's what we're trying to help you be really good at the business you're in, world class. You know, they may not like your message, but they like your products and they like your stuff because you're the best. Thank you, Tim. This has been fun. We look forward to having you back again.
Awesome.